quiet hours when the city's hum fades to whispers, I've often revisited the fractures of my past, not to dwell, but to distill the shadows into something sharper, something that cuts through the illusions we cling to. This is Echoes from the Edge, a reflection on the descent, the void, and the fragile climb back, drawn from the raw edges of my own story. Addiction's grip, recovery's grind, and the lingering echoes. It's meant for those still navigating the dark. Best suited for audiograms with haunting visuals, dim streets, flickering lights, and a voice that carries the weight of unsaid regret. It starts innocently, doesn't it? A single choice, masked as curiosity or a momentary escape, that unravels the threads holding your life together. For me, it began in my early 20s, around 2012, when I was a student at the Modern Sciences and Arts University in Cairo, pursuing engineering. The pressures mounted, endless classes, exams that felt like judgments on my worth, and a future that loomed large and unforgiving. I was young, ambitious, dreaming of building structures that would stand the test of time, much like the ancient pyramids that dotted my homeland's landscape. But beneath that ambition simmered a quiet unease, a fractured identity born from self-doubt and the weight of expectations. That's when the first hit came, a fleeting puff of hashish at a party, promising relief from the noise in my head. Addiction doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It creeps in like the fog rolling over the Nile at dawn, subtle at first, then all-encompassing, blurring the lines between want and need until you're utterly lost in its haze. What started as occasional experimentation quickly escalated. Hashish gave way to pills, uppers to fuel late-night study sessions that devolved into aimless highs, downers to numb the growing anxiety. By 2014, LSD entered the picture, twisting perceptions into hallucinatory escapes that felt profound but left me more disconnected than ever. And then, heroin, the siren that promised oblivion but delivered chains. Lesson 1. The first lie you tell yourself is that you have control. It's a seductive whisper, just this once to unwind. But once becomes a ritual, chaining you to nights where the mirror reflects a stranger. Eyes hollow, skin pallid, from endlessly chasing highs that peak briefly and crash harder each time. My academic life crumbled under the weight. At Modern Sciences and Arts University, from 2012 to 2015, my grades plummeted. Lectures blurred into incoherence. Assignments piled up untouched. I dropped out, the dream of engineering slipping away like sand through clenched fists. Undeterred, or perhaps in denial, I enrolled in the Bachelor of Business Administration program at Arab Open University in 2015. But the pattern repeated. Attendance sporadic, focus shattered by the constant pull of the next fix. By 2018, another failure, another dropout. The ancient ruins I once aspired to build upon now mirrored my own life. Crumbling, forgotten, eroded by neglect. Relationships frayed in tandem. Friends, once confidants, distanced themselves as my unreliability became evident. Family worried in silence, their concerned glances like daggers I pretended not to see. To fund the escalating habit, I turned to dealing. Hashish to casual users, pills to those seeking quick escapes, LSD for the adventurous. It wasn't glamour. It was desperation, a cycle where I became both consumer and supplier, digging deeper into debt and moral decay. Savings vanished, replaced by IOUs and hollow promises. I scavenged for scraps, pawning possessions, borrowing from anyone who would listen to my increasingly elaborate lies. Lesson 2. Addiction turns abundance into absence. What begins as a spark of relief consumes everything. Your wallet emptied on street corners, your trust eroded in broken commitments, your time swallowed by the endless hunt, leaving you a scavenger in the ruins of your own choices, where even sunlight feels like an intruder. The toll extended beyond the material. One harrowing night, a close friend contracted hepatitis C from shared needles during a session I facilitated. The guilt was visceral, a blade twisting in my gut, deeper and more persistent than any withdrawal symptom. It wasn't just his health at stake. It was the realization that my descent was dragging others down with me. Professionally, opportunities evaporated. I had secured a ghostwriting gig for a famous singer, a chance to channel my lingering creativity into something productive. But days before delivery, I relapsed on heroin, the fog descending so thickly that I couldn't string words together. The job was lost, along with any shred of professional reputation I had left. In those years, I began tallying what I called the 30 losses to addiction, a grim inventory scrawled in notebooks during rare moments of clarity. Lost trust from family, who tiptoed around my volatility. Missed opportunities like scholarships and internships that slipped away. Self-neglect as health deteriorated with irregular meals and sleepless nights. Damaged bonds, friendships reduced to ghosts, and the harm inflicted on others, like my friend's illness or the emotional wreckage left in relationships. There were subtler losses too, the erosion of identity, where I no longer recognized the man in the mirror, the fractured sense of time, days blending into a monotonous pursuit, and the quiet theft of joy, where even music, once a passion, became a trigger for darker memories. Lesson 3. Small betrayals build empires of regret. Ignore the warning signs, the missed calls from loved ones, the empty promises to yourself, the physical tremors signaling overload, and you'll awaken to a kingdom of your own making, where you're both sovereign and captive, ruling over nothing but hollow echoes and what-ifs. The descent wasn't a dramatic plunge. It was a slow, insidious erosion of self, marked by self-sabotage and a fractured identity that I hid behind facades of normalcy. The silence about my pain, the unspoken fears, the unacknowledged shame, grew louder with each passing day, becoming the loudest lie I lived. It was a life of concealment and performance, where every high was a temporary mask over the growing void. But as the fog thickened, the whispers of rock bottom began to echo, hinting at the void that awaited if I didn't find a way to break the silence. There's a point in every descent where the fall stops feeling like motion and starts feeling like stillness. Not peace, never peace. A heavy, suffocating pause where the world keeps moving. Traffic still breathes through Cairo's veins. The Nile still drifts past in different bridges. And you become a locked room inside your own skull. People call it rock bottom, like it's a dramatic destination, a final scene, a sudden crash with sirens and crying and an obvious moral. But my bottom didn't arrive with fireworks. It arrived like a power outage, quiet, total, and absolute. One minute you're pretending you can still choose. The next, you realize you haven't chosen anything in years. By then, the drugs weren't even getting me high. They were just keeping me from feeling the shape of my life. Heroin didn't promise euphoria anymore. It promised absence. And absence is seductive when you're drowning in consequences. Nights blurred into the same ritual. The hunt, the score, the vanish. I'd walk streets that looked familiar but felt staged, like a movie set built to resemble my life. Flickering shop signs, empty sidewalks, a stray dog watching me like it knew my secret, my phone buzzing with messages I couldn't open, missed calls stacking like unpaid debts. I'd tell myself I'd respond tomorrow. Tomorrow became a myth I repeated to stay sane. And then the body starts keeping receipts. Your hands shake at the wrong times. Your stomach turns against you. Sleep becomes a broken door that won't stay shut. Your skin starts feeling like it doesn't belong to you. Too tight, too loud, too aware. Withdrawal doesn't just hurt, it humiliates. It strips you down to a single animal truth. You don't used to feel good. You used to stop feeling bad. That's the void. Not sadness, not fear, not even pain. It's the moment you realize your life has narrowed into a tunnel with only one exit, and you've been calling it coping. One night, one of those nights that could have been any night, I caught my reflection in a dark window, not a mirror, just glass. The city behind me, neon bleeding into shadow, and my face hovering like a ghost layered over it. My eyes looked older than my years. My mouth held a tension like it had forgotten how to smile, without a substance pulling the strings. And for the first time in a long time, the thought landed clean. If I keep going, I will die. Not poetically, not tragically, just statistically. That thought didn't scare me the way it should have. That's what terrified me most. Lesson 4. Rock bottom is when death stops sounding like a threat and starts sounding like relief. When the idea of not existing feels softer than the grind of existing as yourself. When you're no longer chasing pleasure, only quiet. Your addiction has won the argument inside your head. The void is full of small funerals. You bury your appetite. You bury your ambition. You bury your dignity. You bury your name. Because eventually, you stop introducing yourself like you matter. And then you start bargaining with the universe in a language you don't even believe in. Just let me get through this week, and I'll stop. Just let my family not find out, and I'll change. Just let my heart not explode tonight, and I'll never touch it again. Addiction turns prayers into transactions. But the universe doesn't negotiate with a needle. What finally cracked me wasn't one dramatic overdose, or a police raid, or a cinematic collapse. It was accumulation. The slow stacking of losses until the pile became a wall I couldn't climb over or dig under. My friend's hepatitis C echoed louder in my chest than any music I played to drown myself out. The ghostwriting job I threw away sat in my mind like a sealed door, proof that even when opportunity reached for me, I slapped its hand away. My family's eyes, those careful, exhausted eyes, became impossible to unsee. They weren't angry anymore. They were tired. And that kind of tired isn't loud. It's quiet. It's final. I remember sitting alone. No crowd, no party, no scene. Just me and the aftertaste of another lie. The room felt too still. The air felt heavy. My phone lit up and went dark, like a heartbeat I didn't deserve. And I realized something ugly. I wasn't living anymore. I was postponing dying. That's when the silence inside me got loud enough to break. Not with a scream, with a whisper. I can't do this alone. It's such a small sentence, but it's a blade. Because once you say it, truly say it, every illusion collapses behind it. All the I got this. All that's not that bad. All the I can stop whenever. They don't survive that whisper. The first step back isn't rehab. It isn't a meeting. It isn't a new routine, a new city, a new girlfriend, a new version of you. The first step back is surrender, not to weakness, but to reality. It's admitting you've been fighting with your own life and losing. So I reached out. Not perfectly, not heroically, not with confidence. I reached out like a man drowning reaches for air, desperate, ashamed, and finally honest. I told someone the truth, and the truth didn't set me free. Not yet, but it did something equally important. It opened a crack in the void. Just a crack, thin as a razor line of dawn over the Nile. But in darkness, a crack is enough to prove the dark is not permanent. Lesson 5. Recovery begins the moment you stop performing strength and start practicing honesty. You don't climb out by willpower alone. You climb out by letting other hands touch the rope, by admitting you're human, not indestructible, not beyond saving. The void doesn't end in one night. But that night, that quiet night, was the first time I chose life without knowing how to live it. And that choice, fragile as it was, echoed. Not like regret, like a beginning. Recovery doesn't feel like sunrise. Not at first. The first days aren't light, they're exposure. The drugs leave, and they take their noise-canceling headphones with them. Everything you muted comes back at full volume. Shame, memory, consequence. The faces you disappointed, the years you traded for a feeling that lasted minutes. Early sobriety isn't joy. It's an absence of joy. What clinicians call anhedonia. That deadened inability to feel pleasure after long periods of numbing and chemical override. Horowitz, 2020. Lyons, 2023. You can sit in a cafe, watch people laugh, watch life happen, and feel nothing but a hollow distance, as if there's thick glass between you and the world. And in that glass, your reflection is waiting. This is the part they don't romanticize, because the climb isn't heroic. It's humiliating. Not because you're weak, because you're awake. I used to think sobriety would be relief. Instead, it felt like stepping out of a burning building only to realize the smoke is still inside your lungs. You breathe, and it hurts. You sleep, and it breaks. Insomnia drags you through long nights where the ceiling becomes a witness and the dark becomes a courtroom. Kansian and Albanese, 2008. Some nights, Cairo's streetlights flickered like tired eyes. The city kept its rhythm. Car horns, distant voices, a prayer call drifting through the air like a reminder that life still believes in order. I didn't feel ordered. I felt dismantled, because when the substance leaves, the story collapses. Narrative research on recovery keeps coming back to this. Addiction isn't only a chemical attachment, it's an identity. Recovery is not just quitting. It's rebuilding a self that can survive without the old script. Rankin, 2020, Lauka, 2021. That's the terror of early recovery. You don't just miss the drug. You miss the person you were when nothing mattered. And the person you're trying to become feels unfamiliar, fragile, unfinished. Lesson 6. Sobriety is not a cure. It's an honest atmosphere. In that atmosphere, shame rises fast, because shame was always there. You were just sedated enough to ignore it. Shame is a shadow that loves sobriety. It follows you into clean mornings and sits beside you in meetings and whispers, "Look what you've done. Look what you ruined. Look who you infected with your choices." Studies of recovery narratives show how shame can either harden into relapse fuel or soften into a turning point, depending on whether you stay isolated or stay connected. Lamb, 2023. Sharrock, 2019. Isolation lets shame become a law. Connection turns shame into a feeling you can survive. But connection isn't easy when you've spent years practicing disappearance. So the climb starts small, pathetic even. That's how it feels. A phone call you actually answer, a meal you don't skip, a night you don't run from, a conversation where you don't perform. In 12-step storytelling traditions, the shift is often described as from terminal uniqueness to belonging. From I'm different, I'm doomed to I'm not alone, and I'm not special in my suffering. Straub and Kurtz, 2012. The relief isn't glamorous. It's quiet. Still, the sadness stays. Because recovery doesn't erase the ruins. It hands you a flashlight and says, walk through them. I began to hear my 30 losses differently. In addiction, that list was a weapon, proof I was irredeemable. In recovery, it became something else, a map of what mattered enough to grieve. And grief is heavy. It comes in waves that don't ask permission. A song that used to lift you suddenly breaks you. A street corner you use to score on makes your throat tighten. A friend's name makes your stomach twist. A family member's kindness feels like a blade because you remember the years you made them afraid. Sometimes the hardest part isn't resisting the drug. It's resisting the thought that you don't deserve to come back. That's the darker truth of the climb. You have to stay alive long enough to believe you're allowed to. Lesson 7. Early recovery is a mourning period for a life you didn't live. You grieve the degree you dropped. You grieve the reputation you burned. You grieve the love you broke. You grieve the version of yourself that could have been. And then, in the middle of all that mourning, life demands effort anyway. You start learning the cruel math of normal people. Wake up even when you don't want to. Show up even when you're ashamed. Repeat even when you're bored. Recovery is repetition. Recovery is dullness. Recovery is the slow construction of trust, brick by brick, while your brain screams for shortcuts. Some days, you do everything right and still feel empty. That's when it gets dangerous. Not because you want to get high, but because you want to stop feeling time. Addiction is a time machine. It deletes hours. Sobriety makes you live them, and living the hours is the grind. But then, sometimes, something small happens. You laugh once, unexpectedly. You sleep 4 hours without waking. You look in the mirror, and your eyes don't flinch. You tell the truth, and the world doesn't collapse. Not miracles. Evidence. Evidence that the void isn't the final chapter. That the story can hold something other than disaster. So you keep going, sad, tired, shaking, unfinished. Not because you're strong, because you're done being absent. And that is the first real victory of the climb. You stay. They tell you recovery is freedom. They don't tell you it's also haunting, because the drugs can leave your blood and still live in your nervous system, quiet, patient, waiting for the exact angle of light that used to mean yes. Research on relapse describes this as a process, not a single mistake. Triggers, stress, negative mood, old cues, stacking slowly until the mind starts negotiating again. Ekoes and Marlatt, 2011. Brandon et al., 2007. That's what the echoes are. Not nostalgia, not temptation with a smile. Echoes are the old life bouncing off the walls of the new one. A street you used to walk becomes a pulse in your throat. A certain song doesn't just play, it opens a door. A lighter click, a pharmacy smell, a friend's laugh at the wrong pitch. And suddenly your body remembers before your mind does. They call it cue reactivity, conditioned craving. The brain's ancient habit of pairing relief with a ritual. Brandon et al., 2007. In real life, it feels simpler and crueler. Your skin wants what your soul hates. Some nights the sadness returns like it owns you. Not the dramatic sadness, the quiet kind, the one that makes you stare at your ceiling and feel time passing through you. Early recovery can carry long stretches of emotional flatness. Anhedonia, where pleasure is muted and everything feels gray, even the things you fought to get back. Schmank, 2017. That grayness is dangerous because it can start sounding like a verdict. This is it. This is sobriety. Empty. Forever. But it isn't forever. It's a season. A brutal one. In that season, shame tries to reclaim the throne. Shame tells you you're still the same person, just temporarily clean. It pulls out your 30 losses like evidence in court. It replays every betrayal, every broken promise, every face you disappointed. And sometimes it goes further, turning guilt into identity, turning memory into a sentence you can't appeal. Recovery research keeps warning about this. Shame and isolation are a pipeline back to use, because secrecy was always the drug's best friend. White and Cloud, 2008. Ekoes and Bowen, 2010. Addiction thrives where no one can see you. So the hardest work becomes this: staying visible, not celebrated, not praised, just seen. You learn to build what researchers call recovery capital, the resources that make recovery sustainable. People who answer, places that are safe, routines that hold, meaning that doesn't collapse the moment you feel pain. Cloud and Granfield, 2008. White and Cloud, 2008. And that word capital sounds cold until you realize what it really means. You are collecting reasons to live. Some of them are tiny. A morning walk, a cup of tea you actually taste, a message you send instead of spiraling, a meeting you attend when you don't want to be human. These aren't inspirational quotes. They're survival tactics. Because the echoes don't stop, they evolve. One day you'll be fine, and then grief will ambush you. Not just grief for what you lost, but grief for what you did. There's a particular kind of mourning that comes with recovery. Mourning the past without using it as an excuse to destroy the future. Pedraza, 2002. You learn something else too. Sometimes the craving isn't for the drug. It's for erasure, for the old off switch, the old disappearing act. And that's where relapse prevention research becomes painfully personal. Negative affect, depression, stress, loneliness, can become a cue by itself. Ekoes and Bowen, 2010. When you feel bad, your brain offers the familiar solution, even if that solution is a knife. Lesson 8. The echo isn't proof you're failing. It's proof you're alive and remembering. The goal isn't to never hear it. The goal is to hear it and not obey. So you practice, not willpower, skills. You watch the urge rise and fall instead of treating it like a command. You learn to ride it like a wave, not worship it like a god. What relapse prevention work often frames as tolerating craving without acting on it. Marlatt and Donovan, 2005. Ekoes et al., 2013. And slowly, quietly, the echoes change. They still visit, but they don't always demand. A street corner becomes just a street corner again. A song becomes music again, not a portal. A night becomes a night, not a threat. Not every time, but enough times to prove something. You can survive a feeling. That's the great betrayal addiction never wanted you to discover. In the beginning, you thought pain would kill you, but pain is not lethal. Avoidance is. And the ending of this story, if it has an ending at all, is not perfect happiness. It's something darker and truer. A life where you carry the past without letting it steer. A life where your voice, once drowned, becomes a signal fire for someone else still trapped in the fog. Because maybe that's what Echoes from the Edge really is. Not a victory speech, a warning, a witness, a hand reaching back into the dark. And if you're listening from your own edge, hear this. You don't need to feel hopeful today. You only need to stay. Just stay. The echoes will come, and you will outlast them. The indie.